Welcome to Unique Parenting. I am B. Moyes, and today we will be talking about autism. Super excited to talk about autism because I have a 10-year-old little boy, Jacob, who is on the autism spectrum. So I love talking about autism because I have a personal reference to it, not just professionally. So I enjoy that part as well. Second piece is I do love educating parents and informing them with how they can best manage the symptoms and signs of autism at home, but also in different social settings and contexts as well, such as school or at restaurants or wherever else it may be. So autism is near and dear to me. I enjoy having a child on the spectrum. I think it is just such a different way of seeing the world and gaining information. And that's why I like calling my son a unique learner, because he is so unique in terms of how he learns and processes information and how he deals with what the world is giving him. So let's start with what is autism. So autism is characteristically present itself in early childhood marked with struggles in communication, sensory, and social interactions. Autism is a neurological disorder with multifaceted developmental issues attached to it, accompanied by repetitive behaviors and interests. There are 3 different levels in autism. There's level 1, level 2, and level 3. And the different levels, really what makes them different levels is really based on how much need and social support and environmental support that individual will need in order to have a functioning life. So level 1s need the least amount of support, level 2 need a little bit more, level 3 may need substantial support. But what they all do share in common is whether you're level 1 or 3, you still need support in terms of how to help you, with understanding certain things that may not come as easily to you as someone else that is not on the autism spectrum. So problem with communication tend to be what I see as the most confusing one, because typically level 1s have high verbal and speak very well, but they have a hard time with communicating. So the ability to speak is not the same as the ability to communicate. So level 1s, while they may be they may have high intellect and have the ability to communicate, they do not have the ability to properly communicate and understand some social cues and pragmatics of speech. That tends to create a social difficulties in terms of what they can take in and have a hard time giving it back. So level 2s may have more language or some language, but they're not as verbal as level 1, and level 3 sometimes have no language at all and may require the aid of devices in order to communicate. However, they can still communicate. They can still teach you how to interact with them appropriately and how to best fit their needs. So that is the issues with problems in communication. Sensory issues. So most individuals on the autism spectrum have some kind of sensory processing disorder or sensory processing difficulties. And when you think about sensory processing, you have to think about all the senses. So you're talking about sight, sound, smell, taste, where you may have a child that will not eat a particular type of food just because of the way it looks, not even how it tastes, just the look of it is off-putting. Or, going into a very loud room may be overwhelming to a particular child because of all the different sights that's coming in with the sound and the smell and anything else that's coming. It might be a sensory overload, which tend to create a meltdown. And a meltdown is basically when you're so overwhelmed with the situation, you do not know what to do. So you just kind of melt down. And it kind of looks like a tantrum, but a tantrum is something you can control. A meltdown is you're not in control of it and it's just happening. So my son is a sensory seeker. So for him, the louder the better, the more, the smellier the better. So he seeks touch and craves and kind of is very adventurous. So he is quite the seeker, where some other kids on the spectrum may not be that way. So if you've met one child on the spectrum, you've met one child on the spectrum. So senses of taste, sense of balance, all these different things may be impacted by a child who has autism. The social interaction issues, I think, would be the biggest one, because it's a little bit painful to watch your child want to interact socially but don't know how to engage and how to join in. So there's just a struggle to figure out the rules of the game, the play, what's going on, how to appropriately enter, and how to be appropriate once you've entered. I see this more with level ones, where they struggle to be appropriate in the right context. They may say something bluntly or rudely, probably because they just are saying, they're honestly speaking, right? So there's no filter. It looks as if there's no filter. So it creates a social outcast, and they so badly want to be part of that dynamic. So social interactions, like difficulties with nonverbal cues and things like that. Now, what are the symptoms of autism? Again, there's a couple of different things that a child on the spectrum may experience, but those three, I like to kind of stick to them because they're the most common in terms of any child on the spectrum is going to have some type of sensory struggle, they're going to have social interaction, and they're going to struggle with communication. Learning disability may or may not come with autism, because autism doesn't mean that your child has a cognitive impairment, but they may have that. So they may or may not have a learning disability, severe speech delay in communication, or speech that looks just like echolalia. So echolalia is really just echoing back what you've heard and not really communicating. So if I say, "How are you doing?" the child may just say, "How are you doing?" instead of saying, "I'm fine." Another type of echolalia could be processing echolalia, where they say, "How are you doing?" Well, you say, "How are you doing?" and the child goes, "How are you doing?" "I'm fine." So they repeat the first part and then answer the question. So echolalia can look in different ways. So it could also be referencing something from a movie, a show, something someone said, where it doesn't really fit in the context of what we're talking about, but that's just what they're echoing back to you. Unable to self-advocate and really stand up for themselves. So not having the ability to tell you what they want and how they want it, just can't make that connection to say, "I want this," or "Stop doing that," or "I don't want that." Usually behavior is what we see, where the child will give you this negative behavior response, and that will immediately stop the request or the demand because they don't know how to effectively communicate that particular need. Lack of awareness for danger, stranger, which kind of is hard, especially if you have an older child on the spectrum who likes technology. They will not know how to appropriately navigate the world of the technological world very well with the social aspect. They may be a whiz at figuring out how to put it together, bring it apart, do all those different things, but the social concept of there's danger on the other side, it's not really something that clicks quite easily, and it needs to be taught. Self-regulating behaviors such as stimming or hand flapping or spinning, and those behaviors are to regulate. So you may want to try and stop your kid, but really it's helping them, handle the situation in that moment. So the hand flapping tends to happen as kind of like a way to regulate yourself. I know for me, I'm a hand talker, so that might be my self-regulating behavior. So just think about something you may be doing to regulate yourself. That may be what an spectrum child is doing as well. So it's not a bad thing. It's a different thing. And typically struggles with sleep, have issues with, sleep and things like that, and sleep issues. That's usually one of the signs of a child on the spectrum. Jake never slept, but now he's a terrific sleeper. So we don't know what causes autism. There's different theories and different reasons and different research out there in terms of what causes autism, some genetic factors and things like that. But for me personally, it doesn't matter. It's just more about how do I help what are the things I can do to manage the symptoms that my son experiences, and what are some things that my clients need to hear in order to better help their home environment as well. Again, you can treat it medicinally, and you can do behavior therapy, you can do diet. I'm in a school of thought is nothing is too much, especially with early intervention. You may want to do one thing at a time, just one thing, just to see if it's working. But what worked for one child may not work for another. So definitely figure out which course of action is the best for you in terms of how to manage it, how to figure out how to help your child. And the in-home environment, consistency. I am a broken record when it comes to creating a routine, having consistency, having a schedule. For us, Jacob doesn't have as many meltdowns because he knows what to expect. We have a routine, and even when we're about to go somewhere, we talk about the routine, we create a routine. So those are some of the ways that you can help manage autism in the home, but also learning about it, getting some books, research, reading it, learning exactly what is autism, what does it look like, what it isn't, and figuring out when your child is having, a particular meltdown, how to help them manage that time, or how to get over that particular hump. So talking about autism is my favorite, and the gifts of autism is you get a unique learner, you get a sensitive kid, you get a smart child, you get someone who basically will teach you about life in a way that you didn't necessarily imagine it. And nonverbal does not mean non-communicative. It's just basically, I can't speak, but I have ways to communicate, and I have things to say, and I have wants and needs. So get to know your spectrum child, and get to know the gifts of autism. Get to know your unique learner. So thanks for joining me today about autism, and enjoy your unique parenting journey. Have a good one.